You are told that deep thinking and thorough analysis leads to better decisions. What if I told you that intellectuals who analyze everything stay poor? This sounds logical because considering all angles appears smarter than rushing into decisions. But something's wrong when overthinking people achieve less than simple action takers consistently. Most success advice emphasizes careful planning and comprehensive evaluation before making important life decisions. Why do highly educated analytical people often struggle financially while less educated doers succeed? Deep thinking appears valuable because intelligence and analysis seem obviously superior to impulsive action. But what if excessive analysis creates paralysis rather than better outcomes over time? Think about the smartest person you know who never seems to achieve much. Do they analyze endlessly or take quick action when opportunities appear? The analysis trap operates by convincing intelligent people that more thinking equals better results. If you want to understand why intellectuals get stuck in planning while others execute, subscribe to Prof. John Explained and share this with someone who researches everything perfectly. They need to see why overthinking prevents success rather than enabling achievement. The system creates different relationships between thinking and action depending on your analytical approach. When we say decision making, we mean different processes based on analysis versus execution. For analytical people, good decisions mean researching every option thoroughly before committing to action. They gather extensive information, consider multiple scenarios, and evaluate potential risks comprehensively through study. They measure success through preparation quality and decision-making process rather than outcomes. For action-oriented people, good decisions mean choosing quickly, based on available information immediately. They gather sufficient information rapidly and commit to execution before analysis paralysis sets. They measure success through results achieved rather than preparation quality or process. Think about whether you spend more time analyzing decisions or implementing them quickly. Consider the difference between perfect planning versus imperfect execution with rapid feedback loops. This explains how different decision-making styles affect achievement outcomes over time significantly. The difference isn't about intelligence versus stupidity, but different relationships with uncertainty. But here's where it gets interesting about analysis and execution in competitive environments. The trap doesn't just waste time on endless research instead of productive action. It actually prevents people from developing the momentum necessary for breakthrough success. When analytical people spend months researching opportunities, market conditions change and opportunities disappear. This creates what economists call timing mismatch, where preparation takes longer than windows. Meanwhile, action-oriented people capture opportunities while analytical people are still researching them. Consider how your analysis time affects opportunity capture versus preparation quality in decisions. The analysis trap becomes sophisticated when examining how it handles uncertainty and risk evaluation. Analytical thinking typically seeks to eliminate uncertainty through comprehensive research and planning before action. This uncertainty avoidance prevents engagement with opportunities that require accepting incomplete information naturally. The perfectionism creates what psychologists call decision paralysis, where options multiply rather than clarify. Analytical people discover more variables and complications through research rather than solutions. Meanwhile, action-oriented people accept uncertainty as permanent and make decisions with incomplete information. Do you find research clarifying decisions or revealing more complexity that delays action? What happens when you try to eliminate all uncertainty before committing resources? The analysis trap exploits what behavioral economists call information overload in decision-making processes completely. More research creates more data, but not necessarily better decisions or outcomes. This overload prevents people from distinguishing between useful information versus interesting information effectively. Information addiction also prevents people from recognizing when additional research provides diminishing returns. Choosing quick action with feedback often produces better results than extensive planning. Meanwhile, action-oriented people focus on implementation rather than information gathering for decisions. The analysis trap creates what psychologists call intellectual superiority complex, where thinking feels virtuous. Analytical people derive satisfaction from comprehensive research and sophisticated reasoning rather than results. This satisfaction prevents recognition that simple approaches often produce better outcomes effectively. Superiority also prevents analytical people from learning from less educated but successful individuals. Meanwhile, action-oriented people learn from anyone who achieves results regardless of education. They can adopt effective strategies rather than dismissing them as intellectually inferior. The analysis trap creates decision fatigue, where choices become increasingly difficult over time. Analytical people exhaust mental energy on evaluation, rather than execution and implementation. This fatigue prevents decisive action when opportunities require quick responses and commitments. Choice paralysis becomes problematic when people cannot commit to imperfect options that work. But they optimize decision-making process rather than optimizing results through rapid execution and adjustment. Meanwhile, action-oriented people preserve energy for implementation rather than endless evaluation cycles. But something more sophisticated happens with analytical thinking and market timing and opportunities. The trap doesn't just delay decisions through excessive research and evaluation processes. It creates systematic disadvantage in environments where speed determines success more than preparation. Markets reward first movers and early adopters rather than perfect planners and opportunities. This timing advantage goes to people who act quickly with sufficient information. The research also prevents recognition that implementation teaches more than preparation in dynamic environments. Meanwhile, action-oriented people learn through execution and adjust strategies based on feedback. They can improve through iteration rather than attempting perfection before starting activities. The analysis trap handles what economists call opportunity cost blindness in time allocation decisions. Analytical people cannot calculate returns on research time versus implementation time effectively. This blindness prevents recognition that execution often provides better learning than additional research. Time thinking also prevents analytical people from understanding that speed creates compound advantages. Meanwhile, action-oriented people understand that early movement generates feedback and experience advantages. They can compound learning rather than perfecting plans that become outdated. The analysis trap also exploits what psychologists call identity protection and intellectual self-image maintenance. Analytical people derive identity from being thoughtful and comprehensive, rather than successful practically. This identity prevents acknowledgement that simple approaches might work better than sophisticated ones. Identity protection also prevents analytical people from adopting strategies that seem intellectually beneath them. Meanwhile, action-oriented people care about results rather than methods appearing sophisticated or intelligent. They can use whatever works regardless of intellectual complexity or elegance. But there's something even more sophisticated happening with analysis and social validation in decision-making. The trap doesn't just create decision delays through excessive research and planning processes. It creates social reinforcement for appearing thoughtful rather than being effective in outcomes. Analytical people receive praise for thorough research and careful consideration from other analytical people. This validation creates feedback loops that reward process over results systematically and consistently. The social aspect also prevents learning from action-oriented people who achieve results. Meanwhile, action-oriented people seek validation through results rather than process approval from others. They can focus on outcomes rather than appearing intelligent or sophisticated to observers. The analysis trap addresses what behavioral economists call perfectionism bias in execution standards and expectations. Analytical people delay action until plans feel complete and risk-free rather than adequate. This perfection requirement prevents engagement with opportunities that require accepting imperfection and uncertainty. Perfect planning also prevents analytical people from understanding that adjustment happens through action rather than preparation. Meanwhile, action-oriented people understand that plans change through implementation and feedback naturally. They can adjust course rather than planning perfect routes that don't exist. The analysis trap also exploits what economists call information asymmetry, misunderstanding and competitive advantage thinking. Analytical people believe comprehensive research creates competitive advantages through superior preparation and knowledge. This belief prevents recognition that execution speed often matters more than information. Research advantages also disappear when everyone has access to similar information through modern technology. Meanwhile, action-oriented people understand that execution creates advantages rather than information gathering. They can build momentum while others are still researching opportunities. But perhaps most insidious involves how analytical thinking affects confidence and self-efficacy development. Analytical people who delay action never develop confidence through successful execution and achievement. This confidence gap prevents risk-taking necessary for breakthrough success and advancement opportunities. Analysis also creates what psychologists call learned hesitation, where decision-making becomes increasingly difficult. Analytical people lose trust in their judgment because they always see more complications. Meanwhile, action-oriented people develop confidence through repeated execution, regardless of imperfect outcomes. The analysis trap creates expertise illusion, where research feels like progress rather than activity. Analytical people become experts on subjects without ever applying knowledge practically or effectively. This expertise provides intellectual satisfaction while preventing real-world application and results. Meanwhile, action-oriented people develop practical expertise through implementation rather than theoretical study. They can solve problems rather than just understanding them intellectually through comprehensive research. The analysis trap works by providing intellectual satisfaction through comprehensive research while preventing achievement. It allows people to feel smart and thorough while remaining unsuccessful practically. The system provides thinking rewards while creating execution disadvantages and limitations. Analytical people experience satisfaction through research completion while losing opportunities that require speed. Meanwhile, actual success requires execution with incomplete information rather than perfect planning through research. The trap perpetuates because analytical people who succeed often had execution advantages, enabling action. They become advocates for thorough planning while overlooking timing advantages that worked. The successful examples obscure people who achieve results through different approaches to decisions. And remarkably, the analysis trap has convinced people that quick action equals recklessness completely. When examining success patterns reveals that rapid execution often provides superior outcomes. Analytical people need action bias rather than just research optimization for achievement. The analysis trap represents effective mechanisms for converting intelligence into inaction rather than results. It transforms thinking ability into endless preparation without requiring execution or practical application. Understanding this trap doesn't mean avoiding research but recognizing execution priorities over perfection. It means prioritizing sufficient information while maintaining action bias for opportunity capture successfully. If you want analysis of how intellectual habits create limitations rather than advantages, subscribe to Prof. Zhang Explained. Share this with someone who researches everything perfectly but struggles with execution consistently. They need understanding why action bias provides superior outcomes than analysis perfection. The analysis trap also creates what economists call research addiction, where information gathering becomes compulsive. Analytical people feel obligated to research every detail rather than accepting sufficient information. This addiction prevents recognition that additional research often provides diminishing returns for decisions. Information compulsion also prevents people from developing judgment about when research should stop. Meanwhile, action-oriented people can distinguish between sufficient information versus complete information effectively. They understand that perfect information rarely exists in competitive environments and markets. Consider how your research habits affect decision timing versus information quality and opportunities. Does additional research typically improve outcomes or delay beneficial actions? The analysis trap exploits what psychologists call cognitive load maximization in decision-making processes and thinking. Analytical people increase complexity rather than simplifying decisions through excessive research and evaluation. This complexity prevents clear thinking and decisive action when opportunities require responses. Mental overload also creates what behavioral scientists call decision fatigue, where choosing becomes difficult. Analytical people exhaust cognitive resources on analysis rather than preserving energy for execution. Meanwhile, action-oriented people simplify decisions to preserve mental energy for implementation activities. The analysis trap creates what sociologists call intellectual class signaling, where appearing thoughtful matters more. Analytical people demonstrate sophistication through comprehensive research rather than practical results and achievement. This signaling prevents learning from less educated but successful individuals who results. Class signaling also prevents analytical people from adopting strategies that appear unsophisticated publicly. Meanwhile, action-oriented people care about effectiveness rather than intellectual appearance or social status. They can use simple approaches that work rather than complex approaches. But there's something even more sophisticated about how analytical thinking affects networking and relationship building. Analytical people often delay relationship building while researching optimal networking strategies and approaches. This delay prevents access to opportunities that require immediate relationship development and trust. Social analysis also prevents analytical people from engaging authentically with potential collaborators and partners. Meanwhile, action-oriented people build relationships through interaction rather than strategic planning and analysis. They can develop trust through shared activity rather than perfect relationship strategies. The analysis trap also exploits what behavioral economists call sunk cost multiplication in research investment. Analytical people continue researching because they have already invested significant time in analysis. This investment protection prevents switching to execution, even when additional research provides value. Research investment also creates what psychologists call commitment escalation, where more analysis feels necessary. Analytical people justify continued research through previous research investment rather than evaluating returns. Meanwhile, action-oriented people can abandon research when sufficient information exists for decisions. The analysis trap addresses what economists call market timing, misunderstanding and opportunity evaluation, and capture. Analytical people believe thorough preparation improves market timing when speed often determines success. This timing error prevents engagement with opportunities that require immediate responses and commitments. Timing misunderstanding also prevents analytical people from recognizing that markets reward early movement often. Meanwhile, action-oriented people understand that first-mover advantages often exceed preparation advantages significantly. They can capture timing benefits rather than optimizing preparation that delays entry. But perhaps most devastating involves how analytical thinking affects wealth-building timeline and accumulation. The analysis trap creates what psychologists call expertise without execution, where knowledge substitutes for activity. Analytical people derive satisfaction from understanding complex subjects rather than applying knowledge practically. This satisfaction prevents recognition that practical application teaches more than theoretical study. Knowledge accumulation also prevents analytical people from developing skills that require hands-on experience and practice. Meanwhile, action-oriented people learn through doing and develop practical competencies rapidly. They can build skills rather than just understanding them theoretically through research. The analysis trap also creates what economists call opportunity cost accumulation, where delayed action compounds losses. Analytical people miss multiple opportunities while perfecting approaches to single opportunities that disappear. This accumulation prevents recognition that speed creates more opportunities than preparation. Perfect delay costs also increase over time as analytical people age without building momentum. Meanwhile, action-oriented people accumulate experience and relationships through consistent activity over time. They can compound advantages rather than perfecting approaches that never get implemented. But there's something more sophisticated about how analytical thinking affects leadership development and authority building. Analytical people often delay leadership roles while researching optimal leadership strategies and approaches. This delay prevents leadership experience that requires practical engagement with real challenges. Leadership analysis also prevents analytical people from developing confidence necessary for authority roles. Meanwhile, action-oriented people develop leadership through taking responsibility rather than studying leadership theory. They can build authority through demonstrated competence rather than theoretical expertise. The analysis trap addresses what behavioral economists call perfectionism amplification, where standards increase rather than decrease. Analytical people raise their execution standards through research rather than accepting good enough approaches. This amplification prevents action because nothing feels adequately prepared or researched for execution. Standard inflation also prevents analytical people from recognizing that imperfect action beats perfect inaction. Meanwhile, action-oriented people accept imperfection as normal and focus on improvement through iteration. They can refine through practice rather than perfecting through preparation alone. The analysis trap also exploits what psychologists call identity defense, where intellectual self-image requires protection. Analytical people avoid actions that might reveal limitations in their thinking or preparation. This protection prevents learning experiences that require accepting mistakes and imperfection naturally. Identity protection also prevents analytical people from acknowledging when simple approaches work effectively. Meanwhile, action-oriented people can admit mistakes and adopt better approaches regardless of sophistication. They prioritize results over appearing intellectually consistent or sophisticated to others. But perhaps the most insidious aspect involves how analytical thinking affects innovation and creativity development. Analytical people often research existing solutions rather than creating original approaches to problems. This research focus prevents innovation that requires experimenting with untested approaches and methods. Analysis also creates what innovation experts call creative paralysis, where originality gets lost. Research, analytical people become familiar with existing approaches rather than developing novel solutions. Meanwhile, action-oriented people innovate through experimentation and iteration rather than comprehensive research. The analysis trap creates feedback delay, where learning happens through research rather than experience. Analytical people learn about success rather than experiencing success through their own actions. This delay prevents confidence building that comes from personal achievement and practical results. Experience substitution also prevents analytical people from developing intuition that comes from repeated exposure. Meanwhile, action-oriented people develop pattern recognition through practical experience rather than theoretical study. They can trust instincts developed through actual engagement with problems. Understanding this trap doesn't mean avoiding research, but recognizing action priorities and timing. It means gathering sufficient information while maintaining execution bias for opportunity capture and momentum. If you want analysis of how intellectual habits create limitations rather than advantages, subscribe to Prof. Zhang Explained. Share this with someone who researches everything perfectly but struggles with execution consistently. They need understanding why action bias provides superior outcomes than analysis perfection.